friends. So the other day I was working on a client project and I was listening to some playlist on Apple Music that was heavy on angsty stuff from the 90s. Some songs which I had probably not heard since the 90s. But anyway, one of the songs that came up was one that's a little bit obscure maybe, but I definitely remembered it. It was Celine Dion, of all people, the tune Water from the Moon, from one of her first few albums in English. I want to say that it came out maybe 91, 92-ish, but I'm not a Celine super fan, so please don't quote me on that. Anyway, I thought, ooh, there's a real oldie. I remember loving this song and playing it on repeat all the time when I was like 18, 19. I just recently turned 51, and in listening to it again in this, a completely new unit of time, I thought, okay, well, it is, in fact, a beautiful song, but why the hell did I listen to it so much back then? And now, it just kind of hits different, I guess. The obvious answer is that tastes change, but another answer that is perhaps less on the nose, but definitely more worthy of me making this video about, is this: circumstance. Now, let me explain where I'm going with this, and much to your possible relief, it's not a discussion of Celine Dion's discography. Nothing personal, Celine. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're lovely. But anyway, when we are young adults, angst is a thing for most people. It's just part of the growing up process. Not everyone goes through it, but I think most people can relate to that period in their lives, having at least some, since it's a time of new experiences, some confusion, a lot of figuring out how to navigate the adult world. I'm a Gen Xer, so I feel like we all got a little bigger scoop of angst than perhaps other generations, maybe because we came of age during a time where society made some significant shifts. I mean, did you ever even hear the term latchkey kid before the 70s or 80s? What about slacker, which we were often called? Apparently that word existed for a long time prior, but the first time I remember hearing it was in Back to the Future in like 1985. And then suddenly it was everywhere, especially in the 90s. Anyway, regardless of your experience with angst, most people eventually grow out of it, and you also grow out of a lot of other things along with it. We call this blanket term maturity. And with that comes a lot of other things that are useful life skills, some which help you to continue to grow throughout the rest of your life. Some are pretty basic, like learning how to win and lose with grace and dignity, learning how to appreciate the good things and good people that life sends your way, learning that things like loyalty and integrity and honesty are priceless, learning how to laugh at yourself, and learning how to communicate better within your interpersonal relationships. Then you have some less basic things, a little trickier to master, but really important nonetheless, such as learning how to deal with your emotions and process them, learning that your words and deeds have an impact on others, and caring about what that impact is, learning how to apologize, learning how to accept responsibility for yourself and your actions, and what I feel like is one of the bigger ticket items of adulthood, we learn to make better decisions. I saved that one for last because first, it very much validates what I have been saying for years. You don't really know shit till you're at least 30, and even then, it can be iffy. And second, because I'll admit that this is one of my favorite things about adulting by far. When you have matured emotionally, regardless of your actual age, you tend to make different decisions than you did when you were younger, either in age or emotional intelligence, or both. And those different decisions also tend to be better overall because remember how you often hear the term older and wiser? Turns out that's actually a thing. Older brains make better decisions, and there is lots of science behind this. In fact, I read a book recently that did a ton of research on this very thing, and it concluded that your prime decision-making age is approximately, drum roll, 45. And the ages that are considered to be overwhelmingly the hardest mentally, your late 20s and early 30s. So for those of you with teenagers at home, tell them to buckle up because there's still a lot of bumps ahead. I'm sorry. So with that said, what are some of the better decisions that you make when you have matured, which we'll use as a general term? Well, you definitely make better financial decisions, or at least most people do. You make better career moves for sure. You are far less likely to do what one can only classify as dumb things at work, because now you have bills to pay and you need that job to do that. You exercise a lot more caution when doing certain things because you become much better at assessing risks and consequences. And there is something about decision making that happens when you have matured that I want to talk about specifically and highlight because it is very important. When you have matured emotionally and you find yourself at a low point, in a bad season, in a rut, whatever you want to call it, you resist the urge to slip into self-destructive behaviors or bad habits a lot more than you used to. And instead, you focus on finding solutions instead of just thinking that when something goes wrong, it's the end of the world, that's it, you cannot go on, you give up, you won't be the same ever again, etc. and so forth. If you want to clutch your imaginary pearls, sigh dramatically, and stomp off from a room like those ladies always did in the telenovelas my mom used to watch, you can go ahead and insert that here. Now, our ability to trust ourselves and pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and learn from our life experiences, which in turn helps us make better decisions, isn't one of those things that you just wake up one day and have. It's a process. Sometimes that process gets accelerated a bit because of necessity. Even if you're a fairly young adult, you might already have a spouse or partner to think about, or maybe kids that you're in charge of. And sometimes it's because we grow to realize that a lot of those things that you thought were earth-shattering, life-changing events really weren't. Thinking back on your own experiences, surely at least one of these has happened to you. You lose a job, or a girlfriend/boyfriend breaks up with you, or you get rejected or excluded from something, or hell, sometimes all of that and then some happens all at once. And in that unit of time, a mentally younger you sees that as game over. You'll never find another job, or get another date, or be accepted by anyone, or invited to anything. But when you fast forward to today, you know that none of that is true, and it almost feels like it was a whole different life, one you don't really recognize. Sometimes you even feel a little silly for having been so dramatic and giving that much weight to what is really just a sack of nothing burgers. So what changed besides the passage of time that makes you feel radically different about a loss or negative thing in the past? Well, everything, including you. Older and wiser, remember? There's that. But circling back to a word I said earlier, circumstance, that's a big factor too. When you have emotionally matured, you are far less willing to put up with people's nonsense. You are far more likely to have a choose me or lose me mentality about your relationships because you don't have time for games. But you also have no desire to play them either. And that right there, that's it. Your circumstances are different. At some point, most people come to the realization that, hey, I'm 35, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 55. Why am I still putting up with the same old BS from this situation or this person? I'm not happy and I feel like I'm wasting my most valuable commodity, time. As a young person, you tend to feel like, oh, I have so much time to do this or learn that or try this or achieve that, so I'm not going to worry about any of it right now. And sometimes that mentality lasts way longer than it should, sometimes way, way into adulthood. And that's how you get stuck. Until one day, something happens that makes you realize that your viewpoint on time is wrong. You don't actually have as much time as you think. For some people, that's all the kick in the ass they need to make changes. For others, it's a bit more of a process. But either way, circumstances change. Maybe after having a job you absolutely hate, you decide, okay, I'm done, time to learn a new skill or go for a better position or whatever. You make moves. Maybe you stop believing that love has to be difficult and there has to be fighting and suffering, because now that you have actually read Romeo and Juliet, you know that it's not the perfect love story. It actually ends really, really badly, folks. That's why my friend and yours, William Shakespeare, put it in his tragedy category. I don't know where the hell society got the idea that it is anything but that, by the way. I mean, Romeo and Juliet basically met at a party, got married the next day, and then, well, you already know what happened. The whole play takes place over like a 3 to 4 day time span. Oof, yikes on trikes. Anyway, the point of that is angst, drama, struggle, those things are common in young or emotionally immature relationships. In fact, it's hard to find one without at least some of that in there somewhere. But when you have emotionally matured, you don't want that. Those things are no longer interesting to you. You don't, proverbially speaking, play that song on repeat anymore, wondering just how far you have to go to make someone love you, because you already learned that you can't. As a side note, Bonnie Raitt also tried to tell us this in the 90s. Just saying. And look, let's be honest. Would you really want to try to make someone love you anyway? Things like love and deep connections with other people, they develop naturally. They're free-flowing. When you force things, you create a losing situation for both parties, really. One person comes across as pushy or needy, which generally repels people more than it attracts them. And the other person might feel bad or guilty, and when they are not able to develop the right feelings that the other person is looking for, because that's not how feelings work, they can feel cornered or defensive, maybe even angry. And when you are emotionally mature, you certainly aren't interested in any of that either. Friends, here's the truth. The older we get, the less we choose to forgive. Because, as we talked about, your threshold is just lower for nonsense. This applies to any kind of relationship you have with anyone, by the way, whether it be family or friends or whatever. That's why, when you are adulting at a high level, sometimes relationships around you must change because your emotional maturity helps you make better decisions about them. And that means that sometimes we will choose to shed some relationships where we have grown, but the other person hasn't quite got there yet. Or maybe they aren't even on the way. You choose to be more deliberate with who and what you spend your time on. For example, you may have someone you have known for a long time, maybe since childhood, who you used to spend time with a lot and you were close with. But as you've gotten older, you've noticed they have perhaps changed. They are a little bit problematic because maybe they're combative or overly selfish or always playing the victim and forever blaming someone else for their problems. When you're younger and less emotionally mature, that person is what you'd probably call a lot, but you might still talk, you might still hang out, etc. Even though whenever you do, you end up feeling mentally exhausted and annoyed at best. As your emotional maturity grows, and so do you, you start to be a lot less tolerant of that. You start to realize that, hey, maybe this relationship needs to end. One big time sign, or red flag, if you will, that you are done dealing with someone like this is when you start asking yourself, why the hell am I still talking to this person? And look, when you are friends with someone for a long time, it takes courage to sever a bond like that. Some part of you even wants to continue to optimistically hope that one day, with enough help or a life change or a little growing up, to put it simply, this person would change and become more like the person you initially became friends with in the first place. They'd be better. But you know as well as I do that you have no say over when and if someone changes. And you can't make them grow up either. So here's where the ability to make better decisions comes in, and sometimes Better decisions means you've got to cut that cord even when it's a really lengthy one. Now, I'm not saying to check your empathy at the door. You don't have to be mean or spiteful about it. You don't have to leave with shots fired or even announce your departure like it's an airport. But when it's time to go, friends, it's time to go. And look, I know this is way easier said than done. I've done it myself. A few years ago, I stopped speaking to someone who I've known for a long time, like 40 years. We had a good relationship for a while, then not so much, then it was good again. It's a complicated history. There were certainly times where we didn't speak at all because of some deception, betrayal on their part. Probably like 10 or 11 years ago, the person reached out to me once again and apologized for a lot of the pretty terrible things they did. I was fine with that. I mean, I wasn't over here holding a grudge over it, but I didn't forget it either. I decided to give that person a chance, and well, I regret doing that because it turns out that the person who I met initially and was my friend was not who they are in real life, and who they are as an adult is actually kind of worse. Because now their behavior isn't just a kid being a kid. It's an adult who knows better, but continues to play the same manipulative, deceptive cards over and over. The only thing they learned in all those years was to just be better at figuring out how to blame everyone else, how to gaslight people, and so forth. So I slammed that door shut and have not even glanced at it since. Honestly, that's rare for me. I'm not really one to cut people off easily. I have to have really, really good reasons. But when evaluating this most recent incarnation of my relationship with that person, my adult brain had zero interest in dealing with any of that BS. It was a decision that I probably could not have made easily at, say, 21, but it was so easy for me to make in my 40s that it surprised even me, to be honest. Speaking of door slams, there is a psychological phenomenon that you often hear people talk about called the INFJ door slam. If you're not familiar, INFJ is a personality type, one of 16 that Myers-Briggs, who makes probably every psychological test you've ever taken for school or work, has classified that humans can be. I won't go into all that right now, but I am an INFJ myself, and because the door slam is something I have heard spoken about so many times, I'm going to make a video about it in the near future, explaining what it is and why it happens, including the feelings behind it. I want to do that because some people who don't really understand it think it's just callous or rude, but it isn't actually that at all. So if you're interested in this topic, you might want to watch that, so stay tuned. Anyway, back to the point here. When it comes to staying in relationships like the one I just described, or making decisions that you later look back at and think, what the hell was I thinking? I think we can sum it all up like this. Your young mind probably never asked why you were doing the things that you did. You just kind of did them. When you have emotionally matured, that why question becomes infinitely more important. Hell, sometimes it's the most important question. And sometimes the why that you come to realize is that you don't actually have a valid reason for doing something at all. The answer, because that's what I have always done, is not valid, by the way. That is also not an answer. Emotional maturity gives you not just the gift of better decision making, but of better introspection, too. And it is at that point that you make those better decisions to change your circumstances, like we talked about. You stop wasting time on things that don't enrich your life or help you be the person that you know you can be. You stop jumping through hoops to try to make someone interested in you because you realize that forced connections aren't real connections. You stop spending your time and energy on people who don't offer anything positive to your life. You change your playlist, so to speak. Less Celine Dion willing to climb up in the sky and steal the stars in order to win someone over. And perhaps more Motley Crue, telling someone, don't go away mad, just go away. The latter choice is actually a lot better for your mental health. That is definitely not something I thought I would ever say about Motley Crue. Anyway, friends, life is a lot shorter than you think it is. Moments turn into years, that turn into decades, and what feels like the blink of an eye. The less of them you have left, so to speak, the more valuable they become. And that's why you have to make them count and spend your time and energy choosing the things and people that choose you. Spending time with people and things that fulfill you and enrich you versus the things that drain you and make you feel depleted. When those choices become easier to make, you'll know that you've arrived. Make yourself comfortable. Don't look back. Keep moving forward. Your future self will thank you. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.